I didn't stop the Jeep because I saw a lion. I stopped because I thought I saw a mirage. 100 meters ahead, just off the dirt trail, something was lying still, too still. At first glance, it looked like a sun-bleached log, but as I rolled forward, the shape resolved into fur, muscle, a tail that barely flicked, a lion, alone. There was something wrong. I gripped the wheel and glanced around. No other animals, no vehicles. The air was dry enough to crack lips and eyes, and the only sound was the ticking of my engine as it idled. My guide had left me hours ago at the ridge, agreeing to meet at sunset. I wanted solitude, silence, a chance to feel something again. But this wasn't what I meant. The lion didn't move. His ribs rose and fell, but barely. His head was down, tongue curled at the edge of his lip, eyes glazed open. It was like he had given up. He wasn't hunting, wasn't injured, just done. My fingers tightened around my water bottle. Instinct told me not to move. Logic screamed at me to stay inside the vehicle. But another part of me, the same part that had once stopped for a bleeding dog in a rainstorm back in Copenhagen, told me to open the door. I did. The heat punched my face. Every step toward him felt like a test. I knew the rules. Never approach, never interfere, never assume safety. But this wasn't about safety. This was about something else. 10 feet away, I crouched and gently rolled the half-full canister of water toward him. It bumped a rock and stopped 3 feet from his paw. The lion's head moved, just slightly. I froze, chest tight. His eyes met mine, golden, dry, tired. Not wild, not fierce, just empty. I raised both hands slowly, not to threaten, just to say, I'm here. The lion blinked. Then he lifted his head, slowly, agonizingly, and dragged his massive paw forward. Another, then another. He reached the canister. I watched in disbelief as his tongue extended and touched the opening. Water spilled. He drank. It wasn't the way a lion drinks when it's crouched at a riverbank. This was desperation. Quiet. Grateful. My heart thudded in my throat. For reasons I couldn't explain, I crouched lower, watching his throat rise and fall with each swallow. He didn't look at me again. He didn't need to. Something unspoken passed between us, something beyond language or explanation. A kind of acknowledgement, not of fear, not of dominance, but of presence. And I felt something open inside me. It had been so long since I'd felt anything real. When the lion pulled away from the canister and closed his eyes, I took that as my cue. I backed away, step by step, never turning my back. Back. In the Jeep, I sat in stunned silence, hands trembling. I hadn't taken a photo. Not a single frame. I couldn't. That would have broken it. The sanctity of that moment. This wasn't for show. It wasn't for memory. It was a truth exchanged. Between two living things under a merciless sky. That night, in my tent, I couldn't sleep. I kept thinking about the lion's eyes. How hollow they were. How they changed when they met mine. And the quiet way he drank, as if he didn't expect anyone to care. As if that tiny kindness was foreign, but necessary. I had come here to capture images. But today, I witnessed something. That went beyond the lens. And deep down, I knew. That lion wasn't the only one who was thirsty. I wasn't supposed to be in Namibia. Not really. The trip was booked months ago, back when things still felt hopeful. Back when I thought a change of scenery could fix what was broken inside. After the divorce, after the funeral, after my photography business stopped feeling like art and more like survival, I had packed a single bag, grabbed my gear, and told myself this journey would be about rediscovery. But rediscovery is a lie people tell themselves when they're really just running. And I was running. My brother Mads used to say I had a savior complex. He was the free spirit, the reckless one, The kind of man who'd adopt stray cats and pull over in the middle of traffic to help someone push a stalled car. He believed in goodness even when it cost him. When we were kids, he once spent an entire week sneaking bread to a fox with a broken leg that had wandered into our backyard. Our parents were furious. I was terrified. But Mads, he said something I never forgot. If you see something hurting and walk away, it hurts a little part of you too. I didn't believe him then, but I think I do now, because something shifted in me the moment that lion looked into my eyes. I didn't tell anyone about what happened. Not that night, not the next morning. I made a note in my journal, just a single sentence. I gave water to a dying lion. He drank, then looked away. But the sentence didn't feel like enough. Back at the lodge, the other tourists were laughing around breakfast, talking about sunset rhino sightings and elephants near the watering hole. I couldn't join in. I sat alone, stirring coffee that had gone cold, the weight of that moment still sitting on my chest. I opened my phone, looked at the screen, and saw the lock screen wallpaper. Mads and I, side by side, taken 6 months before the car accident. He had been planning to visit Africa. He never got the chance. Now, I was here, and I had no idea what to do with that. That day, I drove aimlessly. I told the rangers I wanted to photograph the southern herds near the dunes, but really, I just wanted to see the lion again. I told myself it was about curiosity, maybe guilt, maybe something else I didn't want to name. I followed the same dirt trail, inching along, slowly. No other vehicles, no tire tracks. It was too early, and then, at the same bend in the road, my heart stopped. The lion was gone. I stepped out of the Jeep, heart thudding, scanning the ground. The canister was still there, rolled slightly away, now dry. But the lion, no blood, no signs of a struggle, just absence. I stared at the dirt, at the faint impression his body had left in the sand. The silence wrapped around me again, but it felt different now. I hadn't imagined it. That had been real. Back in the Jeep, I gripped the steering wheel, my knuckles white. It wasn't about him surviving or not. It was about doing something. One small thing, when the world told you not to. When the rules said look away. For the first time in a long time, I had acted not out of logic or control or obligation, but out of pure, unfiltered instinct. It didn't matter if anyone else knew. But the story wasn't finished. Not yet, and I felt it in my gut. Somehow, I knew. That lion hadn't left for good. He had left to return. The third morning, I returned before sunrise. I didn't plan it. My feet just moved. Before breakfast, before the coffee was ready, before the staff even noticed I was gone, I was already halfway down that same lonely stretch of dirt road, camera bag on the passenger seat, heart pounding like it knew something. I wasn't expecting anything, but I needed to be there. I needed to know if that look in the lion's eyes meant something. What I found, I'll never forget for as long as I live. It wasn't just him anymore. As I turned the familiar bend, brakes pressed in gently, my breath hitched. I let the engine idle and stared through the windshield in stunned disbelief. They were waiting. 5 lions. The old one I'd given water to was sitting upright now, not lying down. He looked better, still thin, still tired, but not collapsing. His eyes were focused, alert, proud, and beside him, flanking his sides like a silent royal guard, were 4 others. 2 large males, 1 younger, a female, all of them watching. Me. Not moving, not threatening, just present. I killed the engine. No sudden movement, no camera this time, no words, just me, slowly opening the door, boots crunching softly against dry earth as I stepped out into a moment that didn't feel real. They didn't flee, didn't growl, didn't circle. They just stayed still, watching me. I raised both hands slightly. "It's just me," I whispered. I don't know why I said it out loud. I guess I wanted them to know I remembered. Then the youngest lion. Not. The old one began walking toward me. My instinct screamed, "Get back in the car," but I didn't move. He wasn't fast, just calm, deliberate, each paw landing like it knew exactly where it was going. When he was about 20 feet away, he stopped, lowered his head, and dropped something on the ground. I squinted. Something. Cloth. He backed away, rejoining the others without ever turning his back. I waited. They waited. Finally, I stepped forward, heartbeat hammering in my ears. I crouched down and picked up what they had left behind. A torn piece of canvas, ripped, sun-faded, soaked in old dust. A nylon strap still attached. Alongside it, a dented wristwatch, still ticking. I didn't breathe for several seconds. I had seen a missing poster pinned on the lodge bulletin board a few days back. A German tourist. Backpacker. Went missing 3 weeks ago after venturing off trail for photos. The face on the poster was blurred in my memory, but the backpack, dark green canvas, identical, the kind I used to own myself. I stood there, stunned, trying to process what I was holding. The lions watched me. They brought this. They wanted me to see it, and for the first time in my life I was sure of something that logic couldn't explain. This wasn't a coincidence. This was deliberate. I whispered, "What are you trying to say?" The pride turned almost in unison and began walking away, silent, steady, as if their mission was complete, all except the old lion. He lingered. He looked at me one last time, those deep, ember-colored eyes locking onto mine, and then he turned, limping slightly, and followed his pride into the trees. I stood there alone, the watch still warm in my palm, the canvas strap tangled in my fingers. No part of this felt ordinary. Something was happening, and whether I understood it or not, one truth settled into my bones like stone. That act of kindness I thought I'd given, it was only the beginning. I didn't sleep that night, not because I was afraid, but because something inside me refused to rest. I kept replaying the moment, the deliberate drop of that torn strap, the slow walk of the young lion, the way they waited. I tried convincing myself it was a fluke, a random animal behavior I couldn't understand. But I knew better. This wasn't just nature doing what nature does. The next morning, I walked into the ranger station and placed the items on the front desk without a word. The senior ranger, a man named Kojo, eyed me carefully. "Where did you find these?" he asked. I hesitated. "Near the Eastern Trail, just lying in the sand." He nodded slowly but didn't press. His fingers traced the dent in the wristwatch, turning it over gently. "Belonged to a German tourist," he muttered. "Went missing 3 weeks ago. Never found a trace." I stayed silent. Kojo didn't look up. He just added, almost as a whisper, "Lions don't move things like this, unless they want them found." I met his eyes. "You believe that?" He paused, then nodded. "I've seen it once before. Long time ago. My grandfather was a ranger too. He told me about a boy who fell into a river gorge during the rainy season. They never found him. But 2 days later, a pride of lions started circling a specific tree. Just one. Same tree every hour. Grandfather finally checked. The boy's shoe was stuck in the roots, and his backpack lay below in the mud. The lions were pointing. Not feeding, pointing. Goosebumps crawled down my arms. I could feel it. The world shifting slightly beneath me. Something deeper than survival or instinct pulsing through these creatures. Later that day, I sat alone in the Jeep, engine off, notebook in hand. I'd filled pages with journal entries, scattered thoughts that didn't make sense. But one sentence kept repeating in my mind, "They remember." The next time I returned to the bend in the road, I brought my camera. But I didn't raise it. I waited, and they returned. The pride appeared from the brush, calm, watchful, their steps synchronized like an unspoken ritual. The old lion, my lion, led them, and again they stopped several feet from me. There was no aggression, no tension, just a stillness that demanded reverence. Then the smallest lioness moved forward. This time she carried something strange in her mouth, a bundle of fabric, tattered, sun-bleached. She dropped it and stepped back. Inside, the cloth was a weather-worn notebook bound in black leather. I knew what it was before I even touched it. I opened the first page. Name, passport number, travel itinerary, all handwritten. The missing tourist's journal. The next few pages were water-stained but legible. Sketches of the lions, descriptions. One entry stood out, written in rushed, messy handwriting. Saw the pride again today. Got closer. Too close. Maybe. But they didn't attack. Just watched me. There's something in their eyes. Something more. My throat tightened. They weren't just bringing back belongings. They were delivering a message. I stood in front of the pride and said aloud, "Thank you." The words sounded small, insufficient, but I hoped they understood. The lions didn't react. They didn't need to. The old lion held my gaze one last time before they turned and walked away once more, vanishing into the trees like ghosts who had finished their story. Only now, I realized, they were inviting me to tell it. The notebook changed everything. I kept it beside me like a relic, flipping through the fragile pages until they began to feel familiar, like the voice of someone I'd never met but somehow missed. The entries weren't long, sketches of the land, thoughts about loneliness, awe over the pride he was tracking. He'd been obsessed, fascinated, but also respectful. There was no arrogance in his words, only wonder and fear. The last entry confirmed it. I made a mistake, tried to follow them alone, slipped, twisted my leg. No signal. Food's gone. I'm scared, but they're still here. One keeps lying beside me like it's watching over me. They're not hunting. They're staying. I closed the journal and stared at the sky through the windshield. The lions hadn't just brought his things back. They had cared. Somewhere, in the wilderness, in a place untouched by noise and human chaos, a pride of lions had stayed with a dying man. Not as predators, as witnesses. It defied every rule I thought I knew about animals. I needed to understand more. That afternoon, I drove out to the conservation post near the ridge. It was small, just a rusted tin roof, 2 tired folding chairs, and a local researcher named Litha who'd been studying lion behavior for 12 years. I didn't tell her the full story, just asked about the pride. Her face lit up. "Ah, that old one, the limping male? That's Tao." "Tao?" I repeated. "Means lion in Tswana." She smiled. "But here, it means more than that. He's a legend. Protected his pride from poachers once. Took a bullet to the leg. Never left them. He's been leading them ever since." I leaned forward. "But he's old now. Very. Should have passed seasons ago. But he hangs on. The others follow him still. They never leave him behind." She paused, thoughtful. "Some say animals don't feel loyalty. I don't believe that. Not after Tao." I didn't know what to say. My chest was tight with something I couldn't name. Guilt? Gratitude? A strange sense of being chosen? I told her what I'd seen. Not everything. Just enough. She didn't laugh, didn't question. Instead, she said softly, "Maybe he knew your kindness wasn't for him alone." "What do you mean?" "You gave him water," she said. "But maybe you were watering something in yourself, too." I looked away, throat burning. She wasn't wrong. Back at the lodge that night, I sat alone again, the sound of insects humming in the background. I opened my notebook and scribbled a new entry. I used to believe kindness had a cost, that every time I gave, I lost something. But Tao didn't take anything from me. He gave something back, a silence I could finally live with. I closed the notebook and looked toward the open darkness beyond the balcony. I could feel them out there. Not watching, just being, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel alone. The next morning, I wasn't alone. Kojo was waiting outside my Jeep when I came down from the lodge. His arms were folded, eyes steady beneath his ranger's cap. "You ready to follow them?" he asked without preamble. I didn't hesitate. "Yes," he nodded once. "Bring water, bring silence, and bring your courage." 2 other rangers joined us, local men who didn't ask questions, only offered respectful nods as I climbed in, beside them. We drove off without fanfare, the vehicle bouncing over familiar dirt paths as we headed toward the bend. The place where it had all started. They were already there. The Pride stood at the edge of the trail, almost like they'd been expecting us. Tao was at the front again, head raised, mane catching the breeze like a banner of old royalty. He didn't move as we pulled up. He just looked at us. No fear, no hunger, no impatience. Kojo said quietly, "Don't talk. Don't look at them. Too long. If they start walking, you follow. If they stop, you stop." We waited. Then Tao turned, and the whole Pride moved as one. We followed, through brush and dust, dry grass that cut at our boots, gullies that dipped and rose in silent rhythm. We followed. The lions kept their pace slow, steady, never too far, ahead. They paused often, turning just enough for us to know where to go next. It was unlike anything I'd ever seen. This wasn't wild randomness. It was intentional. A path. Every 20 minutes or so, one of the younger lions would stop and glance back, checking on us, I swear it. Making sure we hadn't gotten lost or left behind. Kojo whispered once, "They want us to see something." After almost 2 hours, they stopped near a dry ravine. There was nothing special about the place. Rocks, cracked earth, a single bent tree leaning sideways. But the lions gathered around one side of the slope, silent and still, their bodies forming, a loose semicircle around something we couldn't yet see. Kojo raised his hand to halt us. Then, slowly, carefully, we stepped forward. The scent hit first. Not fresh, but not completely gone either. As we neared, the truth came into view. A shallow depression in the earth, partially hidden under branches and brush. A collapsed ledge. And there, nestled beneath the slope, were bones. Human bones, wrapped in faded cloth. A collapsed frame of what had once been a body curled inward as if asleep. A broken camera beside it, cracked open, and a torn backpack with the German tourist's name stitched on the tag. I stopped breathing. One of the rangers dropped to a knee and murmured a short prayer in his language. Kojo crouched beside the remains, gently brushing away the dust. "No signs of a struggle," he muttered. "No claw marks. No tearing. He didn't die by them." He looked up at me. He died with them. I couldn't speak. All I could do was kneel beside the rocks and stare at the remains, thinking about those final entries in the journal, thinking about a young man lying there, alone, afraid. Except he wasn't really alone. He was never alone. The lions stayed nearby, unmoving. Tao sat directly across from me, watching with eyes that felt like they held years, generations, of something deeper than memory, something closer to understanding. He didn't blink, and in that quiet, I finally understood what this was. Not a warning, not a threat, a return. They didn't just come to remind us of death. They came so we wouldn't forget that he mattered. That someone stayed. That in the final moments of his life, kindness wasn't a human trait. It was something older, something wilder, and something deeply, undeniably real. The camera was heavier than I expected. It had been damaged in the fall, lens cracked, body split, but somehow the memory card had survived. One of the rangers gently handed it to me. Dust. Still clinging to the plastic edges. I slipped it into my shirt pocket without a word. Back at the lodge, I sat alone in the corner of the main office, staring at the old laptop as it loaded the files. My hands trembled. Not from fear, but from something deeper. Anticipation, maybe. Grief. Definitely. When the thumbnails finally appeared, I froze. There were over 200 photos. Most were blurred, ordinary, or poorly lit. But the sequence, toward the end, that's where everything changed. The young tourist, his name was Lucas, I'd learned, had gotten closer to the Pride than anyone should. One photo showed him crouched maybe 20 feet away from Tao, his camera raised. A grin of disbelief frozen on his face. Then came a photo of Tao staring directly into the lens, not baring teeth, not crouching to pounce, just staring. The light in his eyes was haunting, measured, like he was trying to understand what this human wanted from him. Another photo. Lucas had moved closer. Then the final sequence began. 3 photos. The first, Lucas, lying on the ground, clutching his leg, an injury, probably a fall. The second, a lioness sitting nearby, her head tilted toward him, watching, protecting. The third, blurry, unfocused, tilted at an angle as if taken from the ground, showed Lucas reaching out toward the Pride, his fingers just inches from the earth. In the background, Tao stood nearby, eyes fixed not on the camera, but on the boy, himself, and then nothing. No more photos, no farewell. But in those frames, I saw it all. Not fear, not chaos. Company. He hadn't died. Afraid. He died seen. I leaned back, closing the laptop lid slowly. I stared at the ceiling, the weight of those images pressing into my chest like a stone I couldn't move. Later that evening, I printed the last photo. I framed it. Not for display, but for remembrance. Kojo came to my room just after sunset. I handed him the photo and waited. He looked at it for a long time, silent. Then he spoke, voice low and even. They didn't abandon him. I shook my head. No, they didn't. He sat down across from me, hands resting on his knees. There are things out here, he said, that don't make sense to people who only look for science. But those who look with respect, they see stories. I nodded. This one deserves to be told. Then tell it, Kojo said, but not as a warning. Tell it as a memory, as a debt paid. A silence settled between us. Not empty. Full, and I knew, deep in a place I hadn't accessed in years, that I hadn't just witnessed something extraordinary. I had shared in it. This wasn't about lions or tourists or chance. It was about something, lost being returned. A message carried not in words, but in presence, and patience, and the final click of a camera held by shaking hands. The last photograph wasn't of a lion, it was of a connection, and it was real. I couldn't let it go. Days had passed, but Tao haunted me, not like a ghost, but like a whisper I hadn't fully heard yet. I needed answers, not just about the tourist, not just about the Pride, but about him, the lion who had waited for me, who had brought something back when no one asked him to. So I returned to Litha, the conservationist. By the ridge. This time, I didn't come with cautious questions. I came with a quiet kind of urgency. She didn't seem surprised. "You want to know who he really is," she said before I even spoke. I nodded. She led me behind the outpost, into a shed filled with handwritten logs, weather-worn maps, and faded photographs clipped to corkboards. She pulled out a small rusted tin box. Inside were records, sightings, veterinary notes, old GPS collar data. She handed me a photo. Tao, 15 years younger, standing beside a lioness, 3 cubs behind them. His mane was fuller, but his eyes, those deep, steady eyes, were the same. He was born in the northern plains, Litha said, orphaned during a drought, raised by his sister until poachers came through and wiped out half the Pride. Tao survived by leading what was left, just 3 lions. Everyone thought they'd scatter, but he kept them together. She paused, tapping the photo gently. Then, 5 years ago, something remarkable happened. He dragged an injured cub out of a trap, Metal teeth nearly crushed the poor thing's leg. Tao stayed beside him until help came. Didn't run, didn't flee, just stayed. I stared at the image. So he's always been like this, I murmured. Protective, loyal, selective, she replied. He doesn't trust easily, but when he does, she looked at me. It's forever. I swallowed the lump rising in my throat. The pieces were aligning now. Tao wasn't just a lion who happened to cross paths with a thirsty man. He was a sentinel, a keeper of something ancient, something most humans never take the time to see. Litha leaned against the table and said, "You offered him water, but you also gave him something most humans don't give animals." What? Dignity. That word hit me hard. It rolled through my chest like thunder. She continued, "Most people look at lions and see either fear or fascination. You saw need. And that old lion, he doesn't forget." I sat down, breath shallow. What do I do with that? Let it change you. That night I walked alone to the bend again. No camera, no notebook, no plan. The air was still. The trees whispered nothing. I didn't see the pride, but I saw the tracks. Massive paws in the dust. Fresh, and in the center of the trail was something small, barely noticeable unless you were looking. A smooth stone, placed neatly in the middle of the path. Not kicked, not fallen, placed. I bent down, picked it up, and turned it in my hand. It meant nothing, and it meant everything. The story couldn't stay silent. Kojo insisted we file a full report, not just of the discovery, but of how it happened. He kept it factual, careful with language, but he didn't strip away the truth. "A pride of lions led us to the remains of a missing tourist," the report read. "They brought back identifiable belongings. There was no sign of predation. The behavior was unprecedented, purposeful. It spread fast. The lodge posted a short memorial near the entrance. In memory of Lucas Henning, watched by lions, never forgotten." Tourists began leaving small pebbles near the bend, imitating the single stone left for me. The local paper ran a story titled, "The Old Lion That Guided Us Home." Then a wildlife magazine picked it up. Soon after, an international conservation group contacted me about starting a public awareness initiative. I was hesitant at first. I didn't want this to become spectacle. But Kojo said something that changed my mind. If people knew lions were capable of this, they'd protect them differently. So I said yes. We launched a campaign in Lucas's name, Kindness Beyond Species, focused on conservation through connection. We didn't use shock tactics or emotional manipulation. We told the story exactly as it happened. A tourist showed compassion, a lion remembered, a pride returned with a message, and kindness rippled outward. Donations poured in. Not millions, but enough to fund 2 new ranger posts and anti-poaching drones in high-risk zones. Students sent in drawings of Tao. One letter read, "I want to be kind like the lion." That one broke me. I didn't know if it was changing the world, but it was changing someone's world. Mine included. For years, I had viewed kindness like a limited resource, something to ration, something to protect. I thought giving too much made you weak, that it invited disappointment, that it cost more than it returned. But Tao had proved otherwise. His act wasn't transactional. It wasn't for attention or gain. It was instinctual, genuine, silent, just like mine had been. I wasn't a hero. I was just a man who stopped long, enough to see suffering and did something small about it. But small doesn't mean insignificant. Because somewhere in the dry, wild stretch of a place most people only see in documentaries, a dying lion had felt seen, had felt helped, and in return he had remembered. Not with words, not with sound, but with presence, with patience, with purpose. Now, people talked about Tao as more than an animal. They called him a messenger. Maybe they were right, because that message, delivered without roar or violence, was still spreading, and the ripples were only just beginning. It was my last day in Namibia. The sky was pale, stretched thin with morning, and my bag sat packed by the door of my cabin. My return flight was scheduled for late evening, but something kept me from leaving just yet. Something unfinished. I stepped outside, camera left behind intentionally. I didn't want to document. I wanted to witness. By now, everyone at the lodge knew the story. Some approached with cautious reverence. Others smiled quietly, offering no words. It wasn't fame. It felt more like guardianship, like I'd touched something sacred and everyone sensed it. I drove out alone. No radio, no conversation. Just the hum of tires against the earth and the quiet thud of my heart guiding me back to the bend. When I arrived, I knew before the engine even stopped. They were there. The pride stood scattered in the tall grass, resting in soft clusters like they belonged to the land itself. The cubs were there too now, small, flickering shadows among the bigger bodies. The older lionesses lay, calmly, heads up but relaxed, and Tao. He rose when he saw me. His movements were slow, deliberate, but purposeful. The others didn't stop him. No growls, no territorial tension, just silence, thick and electric, as he crossed the distance alone. I stepped out of the jeep and stood. No fear. Tao stopped less than 6 feet from me. We stared at each other for what felt like hours. Then, without a sound, he closed the distance. He didn't lunge or bare his teeth. He pressed his heavy, scar-scarred head gently into my hand. My breath caught, his mane brushed my wrist, coarse but warm, and his massive body trembled slightly, either from age or something else I couldn't name. I stood frozen, hand resting against the side of a creature that could have ended me with a flick of his paw, but chose trust instead. I closed my eyes. In that second, I wasn't a tourist. I wasn't a photographer or a campaign founder or a grieving brother. I was simply there, present, grateful, human. And when Tao finally stepped back, he looked at me one last time, his eyes softer than I'd ever seen, and turned away. He didn't rush. He just returned to the pride, who rose, without hesitation, and followed him silently into the brush. No fanfare. No ceremony. Just a goodbye that felt like a blessing. I didn't cry until the drive back, and I didn't take a single photo. Some moments belong only to memory. The next morning, I found myself back at the bend one final time. Not for the lions. My brother. In the pocket of my jeans was a thin leather bracelet. Weathered, simple, barely holding together. It was the last thing Mads ever gave me. He wore one just like it. We bought them from a roadside vendor in Greece years before either of our lives started unraveling. He believed objects could carry energy. I used to laugh at him for it. Now, I wasn't so sure. I knelt at the edge of the dirt path where Tao had first appeared. The earth was cracked and dry, the grass brittle and yellowed, but it felt alive somehow. Alive with something that watched without being seen. I placed the bracelet at the base of a crooked acacia tree and whispered, "This was his, but it belongs here now." I didn't stay long, just long enough to feel the weight lift. In my journal that night I wrote, "Kindness doesn't demand attention. It doesn't beg for praise. It waits quietly, like old lions in tall grass, and it returns when you least expect it, sometimes years later in forms you no longer recognize." Maybe Mads was right. Maybe objects carry energy. Maybe acts of love do too. When I boarded the plane, the world felt different. Not lighter, deeper, like the soil of that land had reached inside me and planted something I couldn't name yet. Back home, I kept things simple. I didn't try to capitalize on the story. I didn't accept interview requests, brand deals, or viral video invitations. Instead, I started a small foundation in my brother's name, the Mads Heart Fund, focused on wildlife-human empathy projects, education, coexistence, silence over spectacle. We partnered with a school in Windhoek, bringing in local rangers to teach children about lion behavior, not just the biology but the stories. One boy raised his hand during the first session and asked, "Can lions have hearts like people?" Kojo, who was visiting for the day, answered without hesitation, "Yes, and sometimes bigger." The bracelet remained untouched for weeks. Rangers checked the spot. It was never blown away, never taken by scavengers. Just sat there, surrounded by paw prints. One ranger swore they saw Tao nudge it once before settling beside the tree. They didn't move it. None of us did. We let it be. Because some things, just like some gestures, don't need explaining. They just need to be left. A month later, I received the news in a single-line email from Kojo. "Tao has passed." I read the message 3 times. No details, no drama. Just a quiet declaration of something enormous. I didn't cry, not right away. I sat at my desk, eyes blurred, fingertips pressed to the keyboard, heart caught between peace and pain. It wasn't unexpected. The old lion had defied time long enough. But still, it felt like losing a friend. A guide? A silent force that had stitched something broken back together. Kojo later told me the full story. Tao had been found lying beneath the same acacia tree, where I left the bracelet. His body was curled, head resting beside it. The pride was near but not touching him. They had kept their distance, watching, guarding, mourning in a way only they could. He hadn't been attacked. There were no signs of trauma. He had simply let go, as if he knew the last part of his journey was finished. Kojo said, "We didn't move the bracelet. We buried him right there." I thanked him, voice cracking. The image never left me. Tao, in his final breath, returning to the place where a human had shown him kindness, not as dominance, not as intrusion, but as equality. A lion and a man, connected by water, bound by silence, linked by a moment so simple the world almost missed it. Months passed. The story became legend, retold in schools, whispered in camps, printed in guidebooks. But not everyone believed it. Some called it myth. Some said animals don't remember, that they don't love, that they don't thank. Yeah, let them doubt. I knew better. One day, I was invited to speak at a school, the same one where the boy had asked if lions had hearts. I stood before a room of wide eyes and fidgeting hands, unsure how to put the story into words that wouldn't twist it into fairy tale. So I held up a photograph. Not the one from Lucas's camera. Not even one of Tao. It was the bracelet, weathered and sun-faded, sitting beneath the tree. And below it, a line carved into a plaque the rangers had placed at the site. He gave water to the lion, and the lion gave the world a message. That was the story. Not about death, not about heroism, but about something we keep forgetting in our loud, fast, clever world. That kindness is not weakness. That the silent ones are often the most profound. That one gesture, one bottle of water, placed gently in the dirt, can ripple across lives, species, borders, generations. As I left the school that day, a young girl ran up to me, breathless. She handed me a folded note. Inside was a single sentence, written in shaky pencil. "I want to be someone a lion would remember." I smiled, my throat tight, and looked up at the sky. For a moment, I swore I heard a distant roar. Not fierce, not angry, just grateful. If this story moved you even half as much as it moved us, don't forget to subscribe for more powerful true style. Tales that remind us of the kindness still left in the world. From the wildest places on earth to the quietest moments between strangers, we bring you stories that matter. Comment below. I believe kindness echoes. Let's flood the comments with that phrase as a tribute to Tao, and as a reminder that even the smallest act of compassion can ripple through time, species, and souls. Your support helps us keep these stories alive.